Wars, conflict, crime, violence, nuclear threats and personal threats. It sometimes seems like these are the only things which surround us.
Welcome instead to Peace's podcast, where we give a platform to inspiring solutions. We are raising the voices of those who are researching, teaching, singing, and working for peace.
Join Peace's podcast, brought to you by the International Peace Research Association, IPRA, in cooperation with the Peace and Justice Studies Association. Peace's podcast, sharing effective lessons and today's voices speaking out for peace. This is Matt Meyer, Secretary General of the International Peace Research Association, and I'm so excited to be bringing you this episode of our podcast, spotlighting the work that the African Peace Research and Educational Association did in Juba, South Sudan in November 2022. This work, as you'll see, is not just about South Sudan, it's not just about 2022, and it's even not just about Africa. It is what some of us are calling the Juba moment, where a maturation and an intensification of Pan-African peace studies and nonviolence saw the coming together of some great thinkers that really have lessons to teach us all. I was proud to be the co-coordinator of almost a month-long series of conferences, seminars, public events, and internal meetings, along with the distinguished Dr. Moses Monday John of South Sudan's Organization for Nonviolence and Development. Together, Moses and I helped curate many organizations, AFPREA and IPRA included, to have their leaders meet in person in Juba and talk about the future. You'll hear from many of those voices tonight, including some that didn't make it to Juba in person, but sent important messages of their visions, their hopes, and their solidarity. The first you'll hear is from Dr. Cyril Obi. Cyril, as some of you know, is himself a distinguished scholar from Nigeria. He is a major associate and liaison for all of us from the Social Science Resource Center. SSRC has been a leader in the work for decades, almost as long as IPRA, and Cyril here in New York, where he is now based, serves as one of IPRA's United Nations representatives. Dr. Cyril Obi is also the coordinator of the Social Science Resource Council's two major African programs. He's the program director for the Africa Peacebuilding Network and the director of the Next Generation Social Sciences in Africa program. Please welcome to the podcast the words he delivered in Juba, Dr. Cyril Obi.
This conference couldn't have taken place at a better time. This is a time where the world is facing a lot of challenges around issues related to conflict and peace building and the emerging global order in a post-pandemic world. It poses a lot of opportunities for scholars, activists, and practitioners to interrogate these emerging issues and help chart new pathways to peace. It is equally significant that this conference is taking place in South Sudan, Africa's youngest state. And I want to personally congratulate the executive of AFPREA and the organizing committee of this conference for choosing to have this conference in South Sudan. It is a place that holds a lot of significance and we are all proud of the accomplishment of the organizing committee in assembling such an important event in this country.
Because the Juba conferences took place around the time of the first anniversary of the passing of the great Nobel Peace Laureate Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and because the Arch was close to many of us and supportive of all of us over many decades, we thought it very important to open some of our conferencing with a tribute to the Arch that was both political and personal. His grandson, Biso, was with us in person. Biso's mother, the Arch's daughter, Tandi, gave a rousing video presentation, and AFPREA's own Marion Kiem, who herself was just elected UNESCO chair for Africa for peace and sports and the connection that those two concepts make in peace building, especially amongst a new generation. Marion talks about the Arch, about our work in South Africa, and our work globally around sports, peace, and youth. Here, Marion Kiem from South Africa.
Good evening. Warm greetings from Cape Town to all participants of the Juba Peace Conference. I would have so much love to be with you, and I'm very sad that I can't, especially as it is to honor Archbishop Tutu, who has been very special to me, and so is his family. I come from Germany, and I came to South Africa in 1990, just after Nelson Mandela was released from prison as a very active student at that time. And I work at the University of the Western Cape as a director for the Interdisciplinary Center for Sport Science and Development. I also head the Foundation for Sport Development and Peace. And the Arch, as we affectionately called him, has been instrumental in all my work in South Africa and my personal life as well. I worked under his guidance and leadership at the university for 18 years, and we shared a very special passion, which is the passion for sport as a tool for peace, as a tool for change, especially for the young, as a tool for reconciliation, and as a tool for nation building. When I met the Arch in 1994 at his residence in Constantia, he told me something very special, which I would like to quote for you. He said, and I quote, "I often find myself reflecting about joy," he said. "What is it? How does it happen? Is it complicated? Is it simple? Why do some seem to have it and others not? Have we been too weighed down by our past to recognize the joy that exists in each and every one of us? If so, how do we recapture it? We have, I hope, spent many hours in serious discussions about how we might overcome past divisions and hate. But they are difficult and often painful discussions with little opportunity for laughter and for joy. Sport, on the other hand, seemed to represent to the Arch that elusive joy. We both felt in that discussion it offered a glimpse of another road to a future of equality and a democracy in South Africa and in Africa, a road not filled with a herd of those long discussions that sometimes carry into the night, yet one that was equality and equally important in its capacity to heal. And he said, "Is it not the laughter of children playing together in the game of soccer, of volleyball, of rugby, of netball, something of beauty, something that is about joy? Is not teamwork something beautiful to behold in our new South Africa when the team is made up of different colors?" So the power to unite using sport as a tool has been my work for many years in Africa and in South Africa. And the Arch was not alone in this belief in the peace-building power of sport. Indeed, it was his friend Nelson Mandela who also said, "Sport has the power to change the world. It has the power to unite people in a way that little else does. Speaks to the youth in a language they understand. Sport can create hope where once there was only despair."
Of course, the African Peace Research and Education Association has many women and men who have led it over the decades. Many of them, including Bose Babatunde, Bernadette Muthian, Elavi Indura, and others, were with us in person in Juba. But here, giving a brief introduction of some of the work of Ep2 is its current president, Dr. Charles Ndalu Wasike. Dr. Charles of Kenya, president of Ep2.
It is a way of coming up with a homegrown solution to peace, having the actors coming from Africa. And in the backdrop of that, we have African Peace Research Association, AFRIA. It draws participants from all scholars and researchers in peace building, and we do come up with papers, recommendations that inform the policy making. An academic may bring out some issues that an activist may use maybe to rally people and lobby and maybe advance that kind of issues. And also, an academic will learn from an activist that basically these are some of the issues that needs to be addressed. And that will help in policy making and make peace building such an easy way, an all-encompassing initiative.
Ep2 and IPRA had many, many key partners, global, regional, and local, in bringing together the Juba events and the Juba moment. The most significant, in many ways, was the International Fellowship of Reconciliation, the world's oldest and most prominent interfaith peace and nonviolence organization, founded over 100 years ago. One of their key African leaders, Jean-Pierre Massamba, represented them at meetings throughout the 3 weeks. Jean-Pierre is based in his home Congo, Brazzaville, but is a distinguished jurist and judge in both the Congo and in France. Jean-Pierre leads the MIR, the reconciliation organization based in the Congo, and at the end of the Juba period, he was elected vice president of the International Fellowship of Reconciliation. He speaks in his native French, but is translated by Rudolf and Nsang. Rudolf is based in Cameroon and was also a discussant and speaker at our meetings as someone who spoke about his home and peace building there, about his new book, The Greatest Leader in the World, and about the situation of the still colonized English-speaking population of the southern Cameroons, the folk known as Ambazonians, and the territory of Ambazonia. Here then is Jean-Pierre Massamba, translated into English by Rudolf and Nsang.
So African nations have to unite to face these common problems and also bring in international bodies.
Le problème est celui-ci, à notre avis, c'est que le panafricanisme que nous voulons développer ne doit pas non plus nous renfermer entre nous Africains.
So the problem is this: the Pan-Africanism that we want to develop should not hold us or should not just enclose us as Africans.
Le panafricanisme doit s'ouvrir à la solidarité internationale.
It should also open up to international solidarity.
Par rapport à tout cela, nous avons vu quelques priorités, comme je disais. Donc, si je reprends ce que Moïse avait dit il y a quelques jours, nous avons défini des priorités.
So, like I earlier said, what Moses had talked about the last time, of priorities and the priorities in Africa, we actually came up, we actually had to look at the priorities of the priorities.
Nous avons défini 3 priorités.
So we sorted out 3 priorities.
La première priorité, c'est l'éducation à la non-violence, à la réconciliation et à la paix.
The first priority is training and education on non-violence, peace, and reconciliation.
Et plus particulièrement des jeunes.
And more particularly with young people.
En commençant par le bas âge.
Beginning with very tender people of tender ages.
Et ça, c'est une action que nous allons faire au niveau de l'IFOR Afrique en lien avec l'IFOR au niveau international. Tous les membres de l'IFOR au niveau international vont participer à ce programme africain.
And this is a project or an action which we are doing as IFOR nationally and also IFOR internationally. So all IFOR partners, all IFOR organizations internationally will take part in this action and trainings.
Deuxième priorité, c'est le renforcement de la démocratie.
The second priority is the reinforcement of democracy.
Notamment l'implication dans les processus électoraux, parce que nous avons constaté que les processus électoraux sont de plus en plus l'une des sources de conflits en Afrique.
Especially at the level of electoral processes, because we realize that electoral processes are one of the major causes of conflict in Africa.
Et comme vous le savez, le pouvoir, la recherche de pouvoir par la violence, ça entraîne justement encore à des violences et qui se généralisent dans toute la sous-région d'un pays.
Like you know, the search for power, the quest for power, generates more and more conflict across different countries.
The Pan-African Network on Nonviolence and Peacebuilding, PANPEN, has always been opened not just to people from the continent, but also Africans living in the diaspora and key allies, careful not to influence or over-influence the work of AFPREA, which is African-centered, but still welcome in the conversation. The group War Resisters International, which helped birth PANPEN in 2012 and 2014, was then represented by an Afro-Asian colleague, Rosa Mawind, of the still colonized people of West Papua, and by Reverend Chris Nye of the U.S. Here, you'll hear briefly from Chris about the work of War Resisters International.
There are a number of us here who relate both to the International Fellowship of Reconciliation and the War Resisters International, two networks that were founded in the aftermath of the horror of the First World War, and both committed to revolutionary nonviolence to remove war and the causes of war. One is founded on the values of religious nonviolence, and the other is founded on secular principles. But there's also a difference in the approach of reconciliation and fellowship or resistance. Resistance is about saying no to war and violence and oppression. Fellowship and reconciliation is about finding common ground with those with whom we disagree or differ. The North American feminist writer Barbara Deming uses the image of two hands to reflect on these two different acts of work to overcome violence and oppression. We all have two hands, and with one hand we can hold out an arm that says stop, but with the other hand we can reach out in the hope of finding relationship and reconciliation, and in these ways work together to overcome oppression and to build peace.
Another major partner of our work in Juba, South Sudan, was the global network of Catholic nonviolent activists, led by bishops, clergy, and lay people. We were honored to have with us, presenting on their global work, the co-president of Pax Christi International, Sister Teresia Wamayu Wachira of Kenya.
I would like to maybe talk a little about our focus. Currently, our focus is in different areas. One is what we call the Catholic Nonviolence Initiative. The other is about looking at the just peace for Israel and Palestine. Then we have extractivism in Latin America. Look at that. And also the issue of nuclear weapons, the banning of nuclear weapons. So we support the treaty. And then, of course, we are high on advocacy work, and we have representatives in the United Nations. And usually what we request for Africa is that if we have an issue that we are not able to pass across, because we know Africa and its challenges, getting a voice in Africa, all of you know how difficult it is to speak. If we are actually talking about I can't breathe, I think that's a great reality in Africa.
Now you'll hear from Kassahun Checole. Kassahun is the distinguished entrepreneur and Pan-African visionary who founded and is the CEO of Africa World Press and Red Sea Press. Africa World Press has long been, for decades, a tricontinental arm of academic and activist research on the continent and the global south, with bases in the U.S. in the Northeast, but also a long-standing base in his native Eritrea. Cassahun has always struggled and strived to have Europe, African, and North American offices of the press, currently with offices in South Africa, in Cape Town especially, and in the UK at Oxford University. Cassahun's concerns, his worries, and his challenges to us are poignant and important as we go into this second quarter of the 21st century. Mr. Cassahun Checole.
I'm deeply concerned and deeply worried about where we are headed. In a post-colonial era, the Horn of Africa had no time in which the various conflicts have not impacted its life chances. Had no time where peace has taken center place so that people can produce, go to school, do higher development work, etc. Conflict has been part of our life. While the one is in the margins of the Eritrea-Ethiopia war, the unsettled life in Somalia, the political upheavals in the Sudan and South Sudan, with Abyei, Darfur, the Blue Mountains, etc., taking center place in the conflict region. Political and social conflicts have had intercommunal, and the border wars that exist have not given us a chance to mitigate development and to fight against our daily suffering and to work to eradicate our underdevelopment.
We had many voices from South Sudan with us, but featured here one of our very special guests, someone who not only represents the South Sudanese movement, but global movements. Dr. Betty Achan Ogwaro, a South Sudanese politician who was the first in the newly independent South Sudanese government years ago to serve as Minister of Agriculture. She is also a founder and convener of the South Sudanese Women's Parliamentary League, now the South Sudanese Women's Caucus. And significantly for those of us in IPRA, she is important for us, especially in IPRA. She is also a board member and a key advisor to the global network of women Peacebuilders, who we have a long-standing association with. The Global Network of Women Peacebuilders, you may know, was also co-founded by one of IPRA's leading matriarchs, Betty Reardon. And Betty, along with Cora Weiss and many others, pulled together this special network around the globe, of which Betty is a key member. Here then, from South Sudan, the Honorable Elizabeth Betty Achan Ogwaro.
What is the problem really in South Sudan? South Sudan is a very rich country. It has a lot of resources. It will not even need aid from outside if these resources are utilized properly. It will develop itself and everybody will live happy. But I think we are very selfish. You agree with me, South Sudanese? We are very selfish. When you are not a leader, you will say, no, this is not right. But the moment they become leaders, they don't look at the nation. They don't feel this. They are part and parcel of South Sudan. They begin to make a cocoon of themselves. So it is really, really for South Sudanese to agree that let us have a truth. As the Colombian person said, whose truth are you going to talk about? Truth of one group against the other? Truth of one person against the other? Because everybody is denying that they have not committed the atrocity. Everybody is denying the atrocity. So whose truth are you going to collect? And then they don't feel that mobilizing the youth to fight, actually, it doesn't help them being in power. It helps them in being in power. But if you are ruling nobody, are you a ruler? You cannot be a ruler. But with that, now there's another, because we have the political disagreement, there's the social disagreement, but I want to say that we have this cattle raiding, which is becoming a master of South Sudanese, how do you call it, war, conflict? Because the major conflict is now the youth raiding cattle among themselves and killing themselves. They are no longer fighting for that leader whom they wanted to fight for in the beginning. They are now fighting for themselves. And every cattle herder now accumulated guns, all sorts of guns, from the basic small arm to very complicated arm. Even the military is saying some of the arms they don't have. So now, how can South Sudan come out of it? I was recently in Congo, and I was talking to the youth. I said, Congo youth, one of the areas of conflict is among you. You raid Morley, you raid yourselves, you raid Dinkas, you raid. Why don't you stop these raidings? Be comfortable with the animals you have, hand back the guns to the government, and you be peaceful. Then one of them said, you are talking to us as who? I said, I'm talking to you as a South Sudanese. I'm talking to you as a leader. I'm talking to you as Betty. They say, no. Women don't talk to us. Women don't have soul, they say. Women don't have soul, so women cannot talk to us. And I said, okay. I turned the training into mind matters. So we started looking at the mind. What is the mind? What makes the mind what it is? When we went through, he turned back and said, you know what? What you have said is really true. It's about mindset. Our mind is set up, we must raid. If we don't raid, we are not men enough. And he said, from now on, I'm going to tell my colleagues, my dears, that we should change our minds from raiding. We really need, there are a lot of complicated issues in South Sudan for us to solve in order for us to come into talking about truth and talking about reconciliation. because the issue is they are not trusting themselves enough to talk about the issues and to agree that yes, we are wrong, let us not reconcile, so that we talk to the community to reconcile, and then we go for this real truth. Because without real hard truth, there's no real reconciliation. It will be whitewashing. And yet deep inside, they are still practicing the hatred among themselves. Whether it is hatred of that one chair that somebody wants to lead, or it is hatred of one community that think that they are more superior to the other communities, we have this conflict and complication. So South Sudan is still learning.
It's my great pleasure now to introduce a dear friend, Nozizwe Madlala Routledge of South Africa. Nozizwe couldn't join us in person, but she sent a special video in her role now as the Executive Director of the Quaker United Nations office in Geneva. Before then, though, Nozizwe was a South African grassroots organizer and activist, a student of Stephen Biko, and part of the negotiations team for a free South Africa. When apartheid ended in 1994, she was quickly elected and re-elected as a member of parliament and served distinguished roles as the Deputy Minister of Defense and the Deputy Minister of Health, before going on to be the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly. As a member of Parliament, she was always a voice for the people and left Parliament to establish the grassroots organization Embrace Dignity before leaving South Africa recently to head up the UN work for Quakers in Geneva. It's a great pleasure to have some words from also one of the conveners of the Pan-African Nonviolence and Peacebuilders Network, the beloved and honorable Nozizwe Madlala Routledge.
As you meet and reflect on the work that has happened over time and chart the way forward. This is a busy week for us here in Geneva, which we have every year called Geneva Peace Week. Cuno is one of the founder members of the Geneva Peace Building Platform, and we will therefore be participating in many of the events that are organized during this week. I'm looking forward to receiving a report of your meeting and to hearing your thoughts about how we take the work forward. I hope we can continue to work together and now to cooperate from where I am now in Geneva at CUNO. CUNO engages with the United Nations, and in this work we need the input from you coming from the ground in the work that you do, either as peace builders or as peace researchers. I remember when we gathered in Cape Town that cold winter in 2014 and formed this network of networks, as Matt Mayer calls it. And at that time, we had the Burundi drums, the peace drums from Burundi. I still hear them and hope they continue to inspire us in our work. I also hear the warm words of our late father, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, as he greeted us and wished our conference well. Your work in Africa is vital as the conflicts in Ukraine and Russia continue to dominate the news here as well as internationally. And the funds that could be used for development are being directed towards the war here with military assistance. The work that you do is important to bring attention to the conflicts in our region and the fact that some of these conflicts are created particularly as the lack of attention to the root causes of conflict. So with regards to the diversion of resources for military interventions, there are more wars in Africa than any other continent. Therefore, your gathering at this time is crucial in drawing attention not only to the negative news about war, but also to the efforts that you are putting into building peace from the ground up. Thank you so much, and congratulations on your gathering.
Thank you for tuning in. We will drop an episode every third Monday of the month, so follow us to stay informed. See you next time!